Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Amy Bryant of Parenting Beyond Punishment and Wild Child Counseling. I'm local in Atlanta, and I also do online work. And I'm here today with Mary Byrne Eigel. Mary is an author, an artist, a teacher, and a mom. She wrote and illustrated the children's book Wheelie to help children understand that we all navigate the world differently and to challenge the silence is golden paradigm by encouraging parents to include children in decisions that affect them. Mary, thank you so much for being here today. I'm just really excited to learn from you and to share your expertise with everybody.
Oh, Amy, it's my pleasure to be participating in this wonderful, full event. So,
Great. Well, thank you so much. So today you're going to talk about feeling different, and I
mhm.
wonder if you might share with us a little bit about how this conversation started for you.
Absolutely. I think that my personal story was one of my first day of kindergarten. I realized that I was very different from other kids. So at the age of 5 years old and go down, a bit reluctantly, first day of kindergarten, teacher says, all right, everybody cross your legs and sit in a circle. And I watched everybody else do it, and I realized I couldn't do it. I could not cross my legs. I had no understanding of why I couldn't do that. And so I was shamed. Teacher came over. She forced me to try to have my legs do that, and they wouldn't budge. So here I am, very first day, wondering what the heck kindergarten is going to be about, and then wondering what's wrong with me. I'm different. Why can't I do this? And so that was my first experience with being different. Truth of the matter is that I was 25 years old before I realized what my difference was. Experts tell me my parents were probably told that I was going to be a cripple. I was born with bilateral hip dysplasia, which means that your legs are actually not located in your hip sockets. And so as a result of that, walking, running, things like that were very difficult. They were very painful. And my parents were told that I was going to be a cripple. Um, and so as a result of that, they chose to say, don't ever let this child know anything about it. So it was absolute silence. Anytime I had a complaint, why do my legs hurt? Why can't I run? Their response was, we don't know. Why would that be? So it was a difficult thing. I mean, I, as a child, navigated with a lot of pain, chose not to speak because nobody wanted to talk about it, and realized that, gosh, that's a heck of a position for a child to be in. um, so what I needed at that point was to know from adults, honestly, why I was different in an age appropriate way, without shame, without whatever. Uh, and then to be able to say, how can we deal with this together? They left it up to me to navigate by myself. And I remember things, horrible things, like being 8 years old and chopping my left leg off and throwing it out the car door of the station wagon on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, and not saying a word about it. I 6 brothers and sisters, nobody knew. And so what I did as a result, and I think it was something that was sort of a thorn in my side when I finally got new hips at the age of 40, and I was able to be without pain for the first time in my life, and everybody said, hey, you're great. I'm like,
Wow.
I'm carrying with me everything that I
Yeah.
experienced, all the shame, I have no ego, I have no self-image, and to be able to build that back up. So in terms of feeling different, I've got that t-shirt, and to be able to say that we're all different. We're all different in some ways. We're all unique, but to say that we are not allowed to understand it, I think is just a really hard thing to put a child through.
Right. Absolutely. Um, to not have information about what's wrong and some understanding or the ability to talk about it. And you
Absolutely.
dealt with it by saying, well, I'm just going to throw my leg out the window.
Absolutely, and come to find out psychologically that that's sort of a treatment that they actually use, especially for veterans that have lost
Right,
limbs and stuff like that, or it's painful limbs. It's like, hey, imagine it over there in the corner. And when I was
right,
8 years old, intuitively I figured out that was the best thing I could do, was just
right.
separate myself from that limb.
Wow.
And but I think it robbed my personality, my energy, and things like that. Everybody else is thinking very simple thoughts, and I'm doing heavy duty processing about how I'm
Right,
going to navigate from here to there, and that nobody else has to think about it. So I think the loss of self-image, I think the confusion, thinking that there was something wrong with me, that I was just trying to get attention. I'm the oldest of 7 children. You know, things resources were thin in terms of attention from my parents. And when I would do these things and I would just sort of not be accepted for my questions and have them
hmm
thrown back at me, it just felt very harsh, and it was very confusing. And I think
hmm
as a result of it, I learned not to trust adults, and that wasn't the best thing in the long run to have done.
right, right.
So, yeah. Hmm.
And then having other people understand differences. Of course, they didn't know at the time, but now we know, like, we do want children to
Hmm.
understand their own differences. Like you said, like, knowing that would have been so empowering. Like,
Well, and
oh,
I
this
think,
is what's going on.
yes, and to have had words to speak about what it was.
Yeah.
Even when I was in high school and friends would say, oh, you're limping. And I'd be like, I always limp. I don't know why I limp.
Uh,
I limp. So I think just to be able to converse about it, and not being able to process it, and yet knowing my intuition in terms of how I felt, and the fact that the rest of the world was not even willing to understand that, or to know what the challenges were, because I think that we're all different in some way and all unique in some way, and whether that's a physical limitation or an emotional limitation, whatever it might be, I think being able to know that that's okay, that it's there's nothing that we have done to have caused that. And yet I, as a child, thought, I'm just making this stuff up because nobody seems to believe me. So
right,
it was a lot of psychological confusion. And
right.
I think for myself, had I not taken time to write a memoir that I wrote, Silent Courage, uh, not having a process, that I didn't realize how much residual stuff was still there from that experience. It
Right.
it, it was huge. It was sort of post traumatic, and but now, hey, I'm in a much better place, and
hmm
the power of story, the power of having a word to claim. That's what that is, and that's what's going on.
Right.
It's not me. It's a part of me, but it's not me.
Yes, it's not who you are.
Hmm.
It's just a
Hmm.
part of what you're facing in life.
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
Hmm. Hmm.
well, thank you for sharing that. So, you're going to share with us some ways that we help children understand differences.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that um, knowing that the concept of being different is something that any age child, say from 3 on up, can understand differences.
Right.
Here's a square, and one is red, one is yellow. It's different. They're not the same. And to be able to, just in a conversation, this is something that I've had a chance to do with children in classrooms, and even middle school kids, to say, pose a question: have you ever felt different? And knowing that you're going to get a range of answers. And I think what's important is to be able to just allow that avenue to be there, and then not to assume, like, you could have somebody who maybe is vision impaired, or something smaller than that, and say it's like, oh, it must be the fact that you can't see well, that's your biggest limitation. And yet in reality, it might be something else that is a bigger concern as a result of that sort of of thing. Like I think for me, one of the biggest things was the fact that it was so important to be able to just keep up with my peers, to be able to run and walk and not feel like a couch potato. And that was a simple thing. It was my legs that hurt me, but that wasn't my biggest pain. My biggest pain was the fact that I do not want to keep running up and down this block here over and over again for senseless things. It's like, give me a reason that we're going to walk all the way back down the block again. So
Right.
I think to hear it from the kids, have you ever felt different? And secondly, to be able to say, how do you know that you're different? What was it that was out there as sort of the red flag that it's like, yeah, this is how I know I'm different because somebody said something when I go to school. And maybe your difference is the fact that you don't wear the same clothes as everybody else, and somebody is picking up on the fact that's what's going on. Somebody's simple things, but I think the idea of difference is something that's easily understood. And I think that being able to let each child say, well, hey, where is that difference for you?
Mhm.
And to be able then in conversation for kids to be able to hear other kids say, ah, wow, really? That's how you feel? I think in many cases with small differences, kids like say a child that's dyslexic, for them to be able to verbalize what that's like, to be able to say, yeah, you might love to read, but you know what? I would like to read, but it's really hard for me because those letters keep jumping all over the place on the page and stuff like that. That I think we can only understand what we are experiencing. And I know if yeah, I'm not dyslexic, and yet I have a daughter and a husband who are. So I have to let them tell me, what's that like? How does that feel? What are the things that make you feel uncomfortable? Um,
It's
but
so interesting too, right? Because
Mhm,
when we don't have that experiences, holding that space for someone to tell us what it's like,
mm,
and then to
mhm.
have that experience of us believing them, and that's so much of what's going on today, I think. How do we do this?
Yes. And I think that sort of validation, and I've seen validation occur just in simple conversations to say, teacher, parent poses a question. How do you feel different? How do you
Yeah,
know that you're different? How do you know that? I think for a dyslexic child, they could very easily feel, well, everybody struggles to read, unless they see a classmate or a sibling just voraciously reading through things, and they're like, how do you do that? So those are things I think that when we can express them, when we're allowed to express them, and to state that the validation that can then be there, to then leave it open to say, how sensitive can somebody be to what you need? Because
right,
I often use a metaphor. It's like having a starving person and saying, oh my God, I'm going to go buy a steak. And you buy a steak and you realize, you know what, they're starving and they're toothless. And there's no way that steak is going to have any meaning for them. So to be able to have children tell us, what is it that you need? What do you need
right,
to have happen? They're the only ones that are going to know where that comfort zone is.
right.
So,
I love that. Shall I
yeah.
share the slides?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Can you see that?
I can see that. Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. Um, and that's what you were saying. What did you need?
Yes. And I think those 5 questions, especially for them, for the kids to be able to verbalize, putting it out there specifically, it's like, what is it that you would need? Because I think that focuses on something that can be something that changes, and then to be able to say, it's like, okay, what is it? And to be able to negotiate that sort of road. But I think the questions are simple, but I think the answers can be very complex and very opening.
And it's so personal. Like we might look at a child and think, oh, you're what you struggle with most is this. And they might say something totally different. And that's why it's so important to get their perspective. Like you said, to make it meaningful
Mhm.
and find out what it is they need.
That's right. Because I tell you what, in fact, one of the things that I learned is that I think that we are real good, like with books and things like that, to be able to say, hey, here is a child who's got autism. And we write a book and we say, well, here's what it is, and here's what you need to do to help that child in like a storybook. But it's not from the viewpoint of the child to say what is it that that they need. I often will quote, Susie comes back to school without hair. Well, let's talk about how we can do that. That's nothing about what Susie is feeling, the depth of emotion
Right,
and things like that. So I
right,
think having it come from the kids' mouths, what is it, and I think that's where the rich wisdom is.
right. And I love that you said, it's an emotional experience, whether it's a child with
Mm,
autism or a child who has poor vision or whatever it is. It's making that emotional connection with what's going on for them, for the other children too. Like, what a powerful experience.
mhm. Yes, and I think often it's the kind of thing, because we're talking about things that can involve shame, and of course those are the things that we often least want to reveal. That when we can take it and give it a word, sort of validate it, we can take that shame away. And I think
Mm,
that that's a huge shift for a child to
mhm.
be able to go from non-validation to validation and
Right,
with themselves.
right. Okay, so I can't see what you can see, so I'll just ask again that if you can see that.
I sure can. I
Okay,
sure can. Uh-huh.
thanks.
Yes. Uh, so these are exercises that we have done with young children and middle school kids, and it's amazing. They are very lighthearted in a sense that it can be funny. There can be lots of humor involved, but I think in terms of saying that there's a real point to doing this, an awareness sort of thing. So, basically just going through some very general things based on major sorts of physical disabilities. One of the things is that if you try in a group to speak very softly so others can barely hear what you say, and be saying something very important, and see how that feels for the kids to say, I can't hear what you're saying, and to say, well, how does that feel, when I said something really important and you didn't know what it is. Again, it's with kids with hearing difficulties. I think for other kids to understand that it's like they may not be responding to things because they didn't hear everything that got said. And so if you get a non-response, think, oh, wait, yeah, that's right, I sound really, really soft to them. And it's just fun to see the kids sort of struggle with how does that feel when that happens to you,
Mhm,
and yet in a lighthearted sort of a way, but to say, yeah, it's not good. And these are all things that when we've done them, we'll converse about them afterwards, and even have the kids do writings and drawings about them, to say,
mm,
it's like, well, how did any one of those really hit you? It's like, oh man, that was really hard. And the whole point of it being that we want to build compassion, that if there's
right,
understanding, we can then build compassion for others to understand some of these situations.
right.
So
I like that. I think so often we will say to our children, "Why aren't you listening?" Right? And we
absolutely.
need to legitimize their experience, whether the child has a hearing problem or they're unable to um, see or they're distracted, whatever that is. How do we legitimize their experience that they're not purposely trying to do something? And then building
Absolutely.
that compassion.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost similar to, like, in a classroom, having children that have not been identified that need glasses, and you realize they can't see. Same with, I think, hearing difficulty. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that can happen when you realize, whoa, nobody diagnosed the fact that you've really got compromised hearing or compromised vision in terms of being able to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. So yeah. So if we move on, I think and this is sort of a funny one, but it is modeling children that have got muscle like cerebral palsy and things like that. If you try to talk without using your tongue and just let it lie on the bottom of your mouth, and you realize that you sound exactly like somebody who may have cerebral palsy. And I think it's very easy to say, oh, they must just be very dumb because they don't sound intelligent. But when the kids themselves can say, whoa, wow, that's what it's like when the muscles in your tongue don't work. You
Mm.
sound really like you don't know what you're talking about. And so I think, again, it's one that will elicit a lot of giggles in that, but they realize, wow, what if the muscles in your tongue didn't work?
Right. Because your brain still does,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely,
And make that,
absolutely.
what a real experience to say, to have that connection that people with differences are still so worthy and have so much to offer.
Absolutely. In fact, yeah, I was talking to some teachers at a local school district, and just last month they did, it was like special Disabilities Awareness Week, and they took time and they filmed individual kiddos that had different situations and did videos of them. And so every day, Monday through Friday, they got the whole school together and showed the video highlighting the child as what they could do and their frustrations and that. The sweetest thing was that when that child in a wheelchair or whatever rolled down the halls at school, you now had people feeling like, hey, hi, Cindy, how are you? How you doing? As if they knew him, because they were, not that they were made a hero, but it broke down the barriers to say that they're no different and this is what their world is like. And hey, you got 10 minutes to be able to see that and understand it. So
Mhm.
I think it's a great argument for saying the more we know, the more we understand. And
Mhm. And
so,
the more we humanize them, like
yeah.
this person can be my friend just like this other person can be my friend.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and so yeah, no, I think it's great. Another one is take an old pair of glasses and put like opaque tape on them so that you can see through them, but it's really kind of foggy. And then if you hide something across the room and you ask the child, it's like, okay, you've got to go find that object, and to see the frustration of saying, it's like, well, I can see but I can't totally see. And so I knock into things. And I think some of that awkward sort of movement, then kids realize, oh, that's why that happens. It's not that the person is dumb. It's not that that person doesn't want to walk a straight line. It's that they're having to use things around them to feel, to get across a space and to be able to find something that if it's very small, the challenge in terms of doing that. So
Mm.
it's
Mhm.
and even any of these wearing thin gloves and asking kids to pick coins out of a wallet. And we've done it with older kids and actually said, okay, now you're in the line in a grocery store, and put other kids behind them and say, okay, fine. And then the other kids putting pressure and saying, come on, what's wrong? What are you doing? And the child is trying to do this in a frustrating sort of way, but then I think in terms of learning patience, it's like, oh my God, that little thing was really, really tough to do. And
Mhm.
and even, I mean, it's like these sound, like they're uh, really diverse sorts of things. But like I said, each one of these is geared at trying to get at different, physical disabilities, and using a cloth, making a sling, and having giving a child something to do, put on a coat, do a backpack, attempt to button or zip something or pick something up the floor. With that, I think, again, I think it's a way for the kids to realize, like, wow, if that was me, that was really hard, just putting on my jacket. And I think that it's the kind of everyday activities that I I think it's just really sweet to see what the kids reflect on, what they speak
Hmm.
about, what they write about, what they might draw about in terms
Hmm.
of saying, having done a bunch of exercises, what was embarrassing, what was hard, what was difficult, how did that make you
Hmm.
feel? That then they have a chance to relate to the emotional impact that it might be for the child with the disability.
Right.
And uh, having a kid like brace a leg by taking a big cloth and tying up a leg and say, okay, here's some crutches, and guess what, here's a cup, and we're going to put stuff in it, and you've got to make it across the room. So again, simple
Right.
everyday kinds of things that can uh, m- uh, make you feel like, wow, I
Give
now
you
I
some
understand.
insights.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been on crutches a few times, and anytime I see someone, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna open your door, and also like, try to connect. Like, oh, like I remember what it's like, and it's hard.
Hmm.
But knowing that and seeing them as a person. So a question has come up for me. What is it like for a person who has these differences if they're doing these things or in that classroom or in this class where you're building this awareness?
Hmm. Hmm. You know what? I think it's almost like being at the theater and sort of maybe seeing your life being portrayed on stage. Like,
Hmm.
wow, somebody's really taking time to let somebody else understand what my world is like.
Hmm.
Or reading a book that resonates with you, and you find a character. It's like, I feel exactly like that person does. So I think it's tremendous validation
Hmm.
for them to be able to say, to watch their classmates, say, yeah, let me see how you do with these simple situations. And I
Right.
think it ends up encouraging respect among the kids. And
Hmm.
I've seen it happen where they just are willing, kids, rather than blowing past some kids that are walking slower in wheelchairs or stuff like that. As you say, it's like, oh, can I get a door? Can I do this? So
Hmm.
it's really a compassion builder. And
Hmm.
I think for the child who may be disabled, as well as classmates or siblings.
Right. I was thinking too how laughter is such a helpful way of shedding tension and
Mm-hmm.
creating laughter around these difficult situations that come up. Can create those connections. Like maybe it does
Mm-hmm.
feel awkward the first time you're around someone who's different, but then you create that connection of understanding and compassion and think,
Mm-hmm.
wow, okay, this it's not scary. It's just someone who's different, and they're just like me in every way, except our abilities are different.
Oh, absolutely. And I know the one little book Wonder that they're going to do the movie with and stuff like
Right.
that. It's like, this is awesome. And to think every character within that story has now got their own book to say the bully, the this and that, to say, well, was he a bully because he just didn't understand, didn't like. I think that it's great to see that we've got some literature being able to address from the kid's point of view
Right.
what it's like, rather than saying, oh, here's what we should do for that person. Because I think that's sympathy, and what we
Yeah.
want to do is have empathy, not sympathy.
Right. I love that. Yeah, I mean, you have such a clean focus, Mary, on what is the view of the child, what is the
Mm-hmm.
child's perception, and what is the child's experience, or individual. Maybe it's not a child, right? What is the
Mm-hmm.
adult's experience?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's such an
Mm-hmm.
important thing.
I I totally believe that, Amy, and I think the fact that I saw books that were not written from the child's point of view, that I think it's just a whole different world when we let the kids speak.
Yeah. For those of you that are listening, when you get a link to this recording, I'll be sure to have a copy of the slides that Mary made and also links to the book that she wrote, and also her memoir, um, and anything else I can think of that we talk about while we're here. So, and
No.
anything Mary wants to include, Mary, just so you know.
Okay, all
Okay.
right. Yes. Well, in fact, I didn't do it on a slide, Amy, but I'm going to put a list on my blog on the sailorseries.com of
Okay.
books that deal with sort of different characters and how they resolve it and things like that. And also, I would like to offer that in the next 30 days, anybody who is being added to go into the blog and giving me your email, I'm going to do a drawing for a free copy, a couple copies of Wheelie out of the people that visit in the next 30 days. And I
Awesome.
thank you for being able to direct traffic from your great conference here.
Oh, I'm so excited you're here to share this information. If you'll give me that link later this week, I'll make sure to include it. So that will be really exciting.
Okay,
So the
absolutely.
next
Yeah.
part we're going to talk about is storytelling, which is such a great way to empower kids even further. And I love that. I mean, this is what you do, right? Your goal is just to like, how are we going to empower these children? And you have so many wonderful ways. Um, so I think I understand that the next portion is you're going to tell us some practical storytelling tips for how,
Yes.
for ourselves. I totally plan on using them for myself, but also to help our children write stories.
Yes, and I thought I might start it out just by saying that I'm not a writer. I spent 40 years as an art teacher, as an artist, and it was just my desire to want to do a book that put me in this field. And I think the benefits after I did my memoir, and the medical person who did an evaluation of it said, "Mary, you know what you've done by writing this?" I said, "No." I said, I wrote a story," and he's like, "Well, you've done narrative therapy." And I said, "Ah, okay. I don't know what that is." But he's like, "Hey, get this huge medical textbook and you can read all about it." So I did. I didn't enjoy reading all that research, but just real briefly, what the whole notion of narrative therapy I thought it'd be good to share that. It's
Mm.
bigger in New Zealand and in Canada than I think it is here. That's not an official poll. That's just my observation in terms of
Right.
conferences and where these big heavy hitters
Hmm.
are and what they do. But the whole story began back in the 80s in New Zealand when suicide was at an extremely high number, and the country couldn't figure out. It's like we've got to do something, and it was suicides with native peoples. So finally they got a bunch of experts together. It's like we just can't tolerate this anymore. And so these experts, counselors, psychologists, everybody sat with native peoples to try to get them to talk about, what do you think is causing it? Took a long time for there even to be conversation, but one of the things that did happen was they would sit in group, point to their magic mountain, their mecca beyond them, and just point without saying any words. Now that magic mountain was now covered with condos and hotels and things that never used to be there. So what they were trying to say, and didn't even have the words to say it, was that somebody has just destroyed our sacred property, which then destroys our link with our higher powers. And it was as if it was a death sentence. And as the group went on and people were able to voice the fact that it was a transformation and sort of the the change on that mountain that had disturbed them so much that they just didn't know how to relate to the world anymore. And so in storytelling and stuff like that, they got people to talk. Now I don't think they were necessarily writing things, but the fact that they were willing to be in conversation, to have words for what it was, the amount of suicide went down to an extremely low number. So when they realized what they had done, it's like all these people did was tell a story, and now our suicides are like greatly decreased. it spawned a whole movement of this narrative therapy thing. And so I know myself, having written my memoir, I know the things that cleared from my system after my experience just by being able to write about them. The power of the pen. Now, speaking about them does not have that power. It's a matter of writing. And my experience with working through healing arts programs in St. Louis has been that they will have with kids with cancer. Uh, these kids will beat cancer. Pediatric patients beat cancer. Doctors are like, "Good, you're great to go. You're wonderful," and these kids fail to thrive. They fail to go back to the social person that they were before. The in terms of intelligence, in terms of academic performance in school, and doctors are puzzled to say, why, it's like, hey, you're done, you're through. My question to them has been, who's allowed those children to process what they went through? Near death experience. Nobody's given them a get out of jail card free. And so the relationship with this cancer monster is still something that is there. And I think to be able to, and it was my goal to be able to work with some kids that had gone through some real unique experiences, that you can't talk to your peers about this. Even your parents, like, oh, I don't want to know the sad stuff, let's not talk about the sad stuff. And I get that, but I think that there has to be space to be able to talk about, your fears and the things that scared you and the things that continue to
Right.
scare you.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's where story is just, invaluable in terms of having this power to allow that to be processed and put it out there, because I think that we are story, we are the result of everything that has happened to us, but that doesn't mean that we have to be the victim to it. But if we don't state it, then we're still sort of held as a victim of that experience, because we haven't been able to verbalize it or process it. And so yes, so that's why
You do
doing
the
stories.
storytelling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think even, you look at Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling's, she was processing depression as she wrote those books, to say, wow, that's how you came up with some of those crazy characters and those evil powers. This was something that was real, that was going on for you. And yet, it's like, wow, you get it out. And um, it's a different thing. You can see it differently, you relate to it differently. And so yes, it's simple tool. And I think that metaphorically, to be able to say that maybe you don't want to write, maybe your main character isn't going to be yourself, but maybe your main character is going to be a monster. And it's
Right.
like, hey, how do you know when that monster shows up? And it's like, well, this is how I feel when that monster shows up.
Right.
And you're talking about cancer, you're talking about something else, but you can put it out there like that.
It's kind of like throwing your leg out the window,
Yeah, I guess it
because
is.
when you're the monster, you can be anything. You can be
Mm,
angry, you can break things, you can throw your leg out the window, and it doesn't matter because it's not you,
yeah, yes,
right? And
absolutely.
like, what a metaphor to be able to express every part of yourself, that you don't just have to be the good person or the light, but that you have it all, that
Yes,
we experience
yes.
all those emotions.
Yes. And I think culturally we have such a predisposition to dealing with negative situations, especially with children. And I look at even the things that weren't even subjects in books. That is, no, 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 too tough, death. Oh, no, no, you can't write about that. How can
Right.
kids accept it? It's like, how can they ever process it if we
Yeah.
don't give them some
Yeah.
words to do it? And
Right.
I think having story to relate to is just a powerful tool.
It's so
And
powerful.
so, yeah.
I use storytelling in my home. I use it with my daughter's friends. I use it in my
Uh,
counseling office. It is incredibly powerful.
hmm
I just love it.
Yeah, absolutely, because it you can stay in a very safe place, and it's like, hey, it's a pen and a piece of paper. So I think oftentimes as an art teacher, some often parents would, oh my God, you won't believe the drawings that my child is doing. They're so evil. They're so nasty. They're this. It's like, don't be afraid of them. Don't
Right.
don't think that is real. It's something worth talking about. It's something worth addressing. But when we put an adult spin on it and say, "Oh my God, I don't want to see you doing that or talking that," then we
Yes.
just sort of let it
Exactly.
sink deeper into them, and they're going to have more years to try to process it to get it back out again. So,
Right. Well, it's like you said, how do we stop putting our perspective on them and get really
yes,
curious about what's their perspective and what's going on in
yes,
their inner world? And the
yes.
art pictures are storytelling too, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very dynamic. I'll never forget one little girl drawing a picture of family, and she had everybody there, and there was one little person without a head. I knew it was her. And
Yeah.
I asked her to name it. And as she looked at the drawing, she couldn't see that she didn't have a head, but it was her way of saying, I'm just real different. And so they can be very revealing, but it's something that you just don't want to interpret just in a logical way, because
Right.
it's drawings are not logical.
Right.
They are heartfelt and sensitive,
Yeah.
and it's an expression of feelings. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Hmm. Yes. So yeah. So getting
And I
to
just want to apologize, Mary. Every once in a while, my dog keeps jumping up on me, so I keep doing
oh
this. So we just put that out there.
oh, no
Sorry.
problem. No problem.
So
Yeah.
should we talk about those slides? Let me share my
Sure.
screen again.
The
Okay.
writing the story.
Oops, it didn't come up, did it? Okay.
Okay. So the interesting thing about it is the fact that writing a story is just so very simple, and I think that these are the elements that we need to have. So whether you're talking about somebody who is 5 years old, 10, 15 years old, this is all that it takes, is having a main character who can be human, animal, abstract, and in fact there's books where an emotion is the main character.
Mhm.
Maybe that emotion is shown through a landscape that just feels a particular way, and that landscape, that world, is what the main character is. So we've got a main character, and I think what is interesting, to be able to dovetail this with what we were talking about with feeling different, is if you pose the idea of having the kids write a story where the main character is going to be somebody who just is unique in some way. Maybe they're going to be a bird with a broken wing, and to say, it's like, okay, so then they get inside that little character that has to do some unique kind of problem solving, but it's a way of bridging between the two, to say, it's like, okay, somebody can't do everything as easily as everybody else, so how is that going to work out in a story? We've got the setting in terms of being able to uh, say, what does it look like? And in both of these questions, the sub questions that you would use is saying, okay, main character, what do they look like? What do they smell like? What do they have a taste? What do they feel like? Just going through all your senses, just five senses going down. Would they fit inside a backpack? Would they fit inside a locker? Would they fit inside a lunchbox? And so I think one of the things that is teachers have shared that is most challenging for kids to do when they write stories is do the adjectives for them. But I think that if you use sensory sorts of questions, how do they look, smell, feel, taste, then you're having the kids describe a lot of aspects of what that character is.
And
One
how
of
fun
the
is that too, to be like, what does he taste like? Right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely,
just
yes.
lower that anxiety right down. by getting really concrete.
Absolutely. And one of the tools that I've used in workshops and that is this thing called word pictures, where basically what we do is you've got a sheet of words, and they're all for the most part nouns, things like jello, rainbow, ghost, tree, witch, whatever. And the kids have to take two words that are not usually associated together and to put them together to make a new word. So maybe the word that they come up with is a jello witch. Now, the beautiful thing is that, and this you combine with actually doing drawings with it, as well as developing, characters, something. So this Jello witch, well, the child has invented it, so they're the only one that knows anything about him. So you ask them, it's like, so what is it? How big is it? How, if you touch it, is it soft? Is it hard? And it makes them realize that when you're dealing with something that has never been understood before, that you're the one that has to tell us everything that you know about it. And you're the one that gets to be in control, the aspects of that character. So I think doing like a word picture exercise in conjunction with trying to make them understand how it is up to them to do as much description as possible, and how important it is, and that they're the only ones that know what that main character is going to look like. Because you could all the kids could pick the same. They could all pick a bird with a broken wing, and yet there would be as many different characters emerge out of that if they were to draw pictures of it or describe it, as there are, kids in a room. So sensory questions are the key to describing that main character. Setting, the same thing. How does it smell, look, feel, taste? And it's a way of actually teaching a lot of stuff, things like, density. It's like, okay, if you touch it, is it soft, is it hard, is it this, and it's that. So it dovetails with a lot of other great things that might even be going on in the classroom, with things that are being taught, and or things that parents are dealing with at home with kiddos to describe. So and then you have to have a problem. And so the problem, um, in this case, doesn't have to be that the bird has a broken wing. The problem can be several things that the little bird faces in terms of just navigating, through each day. And and I'm just going to take that as an idea, and to say, it's like, okay, so um, we've got the little bird, and he's going to face a couple of problems. Then he's going to solve it, and the little bird has to solve the problem himself. He can take advice from adults, but the adults cannot do the problem solving, which is the other beautiful thing about kid stories, is that adults can't solve it. The child has to solve it. So
That's so empowering too. I mean, children make so few decisions, they're in charge of so little. And here they're in charge of every little detail of the character and the setting and then how to solve the problem.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting when you go through looking at children's books, you realize that they can take advice, they can do this, but it's like, the character in the story, you want them to emerge changed, and the only way that they can change is if they're the one who knows the problem, and then they get to solve it. So I think that's the beautiful thing, that story. And you think of stories, I mean, I think when I was a kid reading things like Nancy Drew, it's like, oh, it was so empowering. It's like, wow, she solved all those situations.
Right.
So yeah, yeah.
I read all those too, and I felt the same way.
Yes, absolutely. Who
Yeah.
doesn't like an empowered character? So
I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
remember as a child thinking that when the kids ignored the adults and solved the problems, because the adults never believed them, right?
Yes.
The adults never believed that there was a ghost under your bed. So you had to figure out how to get that ghost out from under the bed and solve the problem. And those were the
Yes.
best. When I was a
Yes.
child, those were the best.
Yes. Yes. And I think one of the best ways to say, it's like, okay, so what is the problem? Pose the what if question. What if the character had to do this? What if the little bird with the broken wing has got to travel with his siblings and friends to get food,
Uh,
and they're all flying away, and he can't launch off the ground. He's got this damaged wing, and they're all going for food, and he can't get there. What
do you
if
help them come up with a problem?
I think it's real sweet to see them try to figure out
Okay.
what would be a difficulty
Yeah.
for that character.
Okay.
And in most cases, I mean, unless they're really struggling, I think posing, saying, well, what if, imagine what could be something within their day's time, something they have to do, and
Right.
they're going to have trouble doing it.
Nice.
For there to be a source of water, and it's in a bird bath, and the little bird can't fly up to the bird bath.
Mhm.
But then the fun thing comes when saying there might be other problems that emerge. And maybe one of the problems is that there is a little turtle in the grass that only the little bird with the broken wing gets to see, because everybody else has flown away to get food, to do other things. And so the little character is there, and he sees that the turtle is flipped over, and he knows that the turtle is struggling. So even though it's another way of looking at the problem, it's a way of then having your little sort of diff ability character be able to say, well, hey, maybe I can't fly like everybody else or get up to the bird feeder, but I can go ahead and help this little turtle right himself, and nobody else would have seen him because they're all gone. And so I think it's just amazing to see the kinds of things, and you realize that when you let them sort of take off with it, and they think about familiar environments, if they're the ones that are creating the setting for the story, where is that little character at? They're the ones who become compassionate with things like worms or bugs or ladybugs, because they're looking at from their viewpoint, and those things then become these huge little, it's like, wow, look at the ladybug, totally different size when you're a little bird, looking at.
Right.
So, but I think to say that then, in a case like that, the bird goes from feeling like, whoa, those are other things I can't do, but lo, look at the thing that I was able to do, and the little turtle would have suffered there all day until somebody came back and he was there to do it. So I think to say that the little character can change, I think it's sweet to see how kids can think it through, and to and I think especially in combination with the sensitization exercises, that if you've just focused on things that are difficult, it's like, think of something very simple, and how is that to uh, how are you able to figure it out when you're in some sort of a modified situation?
Mm.
So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Uh,
This was the story starter, which I thought was really helpful. I printed
yeah.
this up and I was like, oh, yeah, this is super helpful.
It is, and it's just a series of questions. So we've
Mhm.
we've got the character, and this doesn't so much focus on setting, but obviously you can put that in there. But to say, it's like, yes, describe them. What did they love to do, and what did they hate? Because I think it's real
Yeah.
important to sort of throw the contrary in there. That what is it that they don't like? And I think sometimes books don't always push that
Mhm.
sort of direction. But I think it's so cool, because that's when I think, it's like, oh, that's what they're afraid of. That's what they fear. And that's what's difficult. I think that is just a great question. And even in
Mm.
terms of the problem solving with middle school kids, to imagine a worst case scenario, to say, like, I know in Little Wheelie we had some things where the wheelchair gets peed on by a nasty dog, and it gets beaten up by Brutus because he's locked in a garage because little Johnny won't let the wheelchair come in the house. And it's like, oh, that's really tough. It's like, you know what, that's what kids love, that's what they relate to say, yeah, let me see that they struggle. And so I think those kinds of things. And interestingly enough, I think that for many years, um, that those were some of the honest conversations that it was harder to get publishers to do kids books. But with self-publishing and a lot of stories getting, well, like not that I'm saying this is the best, but Diary of Wimpy Kid, to
Hmm.
say that was something that was self-published before. I mean,
I
and
didn't
it
know
was
that.
kids said, "Oh my gosh, we love that. Bingo.
Yeah.
How many editions of Wimpy Kid are there?"
Yeah.
So I think it was the thing that, again, it points to our cultural,
Yeah.
problem with, having difficulty saying, "Oh, that's too tough a question. You can't have that scenario. That's
Right.
it's like, yeah, right. It's like saying kids don't have nightmares or fears or,
Right.
anything. Yeah.
That they
Yeah.
always feel safe. It just doesn't
Absolutely.
happen, unfortunately.
Yes,
Yeah.
and to think that they feel safe by not having to deal with tough stuff, and I think that there's
Right.
nothing worse than thinking that you're not preparing them from situations that you're gonna deal with.
Right.
In fact, in the second kids book we're working on right now, we've got a middle school kid who's permanently in a wheelchair getting bullied,
Mm.
and it's like whoa, 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 whoa,
Right.
but for the point of being able to have the other characters say, "Wow, how does he deal with it?" Because that's a reality.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. It is. It's hard for us as parents to talk about the hard things. Um,
totally agree.
that's
Yes.
so
Hmm.
necessary.
Yeah. Yes.
Is there any last thing you want to talk about with this or anything else you want to tell anybody? And then I also want to ask you if there's one thing you want to leave with people today.
Well, I think to recognize the power that there is, and simple things like simple exercises to do sensitization, and to in fact, I've got a gal who just joined our team, our tribe of folks, who's been in a wheelchair for 20 years, and she works at Walmart. And she said, she said what hurts her most is that little kids will come down an aisle and say, "Oh, mommy, look at there's a lady in a wheelchair," and parents are like, "Shh, shh, shh, don't say anything, don't say anything." And she
Mm-hmm.
said, "Mary, I wish that parent would allow that child to come up and talk to me." She goes, "I'd be very
Right.
happy to say, here's why I'm in a wheelchair, here's what it is for me," and stuff like that, rather than sort of keep the distance and not, allow the conversation to occur. Uh,
Right. How many times as parents do we experience that, whether it's someone in a
mm,
wheelchair or someone who has clamps on their arm and they're walking, or they can't talk,
yes.
or they have a dog with them,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
having those conversations in a way that's empowering and not shaming of anybody involved. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think you asked, is there anything that I feel, sort of as a last thought, to say that silence is never golden. And I think that whole paradigm of saying that it's like, if we ignore it and we just don't talk about it, maybe it'll go away, or maybe it'll, you know, um, solve itself. Then I think just know that you're leaving it to the child and their own understanding of something, or lack of understanding, to be able to deal with what's there. But to say that if you can validate it and put it out there and have kids understand it, and their friends understand it, that it's just awesome. I remember one instance in my college classroom, very first day, somebody had Tourette's, and he said, "Miss Eigel, I've got something I want to share with the class." I'm like, "Oh, okay," and not knowing what he was going to share. The first day, I didn't even know the kids, and he got up and he says, "Hey, I just want to tell you all I got Tourette's, and this is what it does. And so if you have any questions about it, hey, just ask." And it was like, oh my God, that was the
well,
sweetest thing he could have done, because obviously, I think in terms of classroom dynamic, it was something that we all had to, deal with, each class session. But it was like, whoa, he just, opened it up to say, "Yeah, cool. And we're going to
yeah.
think of you differently because you were willing to share that."
And someone helped him say, do this,
Yes. Yes.
who didn't tell him to keep it to yourself or keep quiet.
Hmm.
Wow, what a
Yeah.
great story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mary, for being here. And
Oh,
thank you for everything you've
thank
shared.
Well, thank you, Amy. It is my honor to be participating in your wonderful conference. And there's so many great resources. And I think the whole idea of saying just equip kids with the tools and parents with the tools to say, hey, we have options. There's other ways of doing things, and being able to process things and understand things in different ways that
Mhm.
makes us all better,
Right.
parents and kiddos.
Parents and kids, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody, for being here today. And we look forward to seeing you in more webinars later.